guys! So July turned out to be a really good reading month for me. I read about 4 books in July, which I know some people read in like a week, but that's about a book a week for me, and that's pretty good. But I like devoured books in July. So I thought I'd share with you. Like I said before, I don't usually like to do batch book reviews, but since I read so many in July, I actually tried to record this video when I recorded the one about working stiff. But all the videos were like only a couple minutes long, like less than 5, so I figured might as well shove them all together. So here is what I read in July, starting with Farenheit 451. Farenheit 451 is a futuristic society kind of close to Brave New World, but it's not as, like, regimented. But it is kind of based around, they don't like you to think in that society. So everything is really quick, like your transportation and stuff is really quick because they don't want you to, like, have time to think. Your life is kind of centered around these things called the families, and it's, your TV screen is the size of your walls, and you can have more than one wall be a TV screen, and they kind of put you into the shows. Like, they'll send you a script, and then they'll dub your name in, so it's like you're part of the TV show that's going on. But the biggest thing is they don't want you to read, and books are actually illegal. The book is based around a character named Guy Montag, who is a firefighter, and firefighters in this day and age go around and they burn books in people's houses that have books in them, and so that's what he does for a living. And he meets a girl named Clarice who's 17, she just moved in next door, and she's always talking about how her and her family just sit around and talk, they don't even watch TV, and they talk about, like, ideas and all kinds of stuff, and she's always asking all these questions, and so it gets him kind of thinking. So one day when he goes to burn a pile of books, and he ends up burning a house down with a woman inside of it, he actually takes a book, which is illegal. And pretty much from the minute he gets his hands on the book, his life kind of starts spiraling out of control, because he starts realizing that he had thoughts in his head that he kind of kept suppressing and burying, but they'd always kind of been there. And that's kind of all I'm going to give away about the plot, because a lot of kind of spoilers happen after that point, so I'm not going to say anymore. I will give you my thoughts on the book. It was okay. It was better than Brave New World. It was very small, too. I think it was way smaller than Brave New World. If not, maybe the same length, but it seemed smaller. I definitely see more parallels between Farenheit 451 world and today's society. It's kind of prolific because technology is kind of like taking over our lives, and you kind of have to wonder if maybe the powers that be kind of push technology so we don't have to think as much, but there's definitely a lot less reading going on, a lot more people focusing on technology and not even people in their own household, which is definitely a theme of the book, of like people living different lives in the same house, but they're so attached to technology that they don't see each other. It was okay. I kind of feel about it the same way as Brave New World, except I like it a little bit better, but it does get pretty rambly at some points, which I kind of like skimmed over. The next book I read was The Immortal Life of Henreitta Lacks, which I've been trying to get my hands on for a couple, well, I've been wanting to read it for a couple years, and I impulse picked it up when I was walking through the library because I saw it and I'm like, oh hey, I've been wanting to read you, so I just grabbed it. And I'm really glad I did. It was a really good book. The Immortal Life of Henreitta Lacks is a true story about a woman in the 50s who had cervical cancer, and this was right when cell research was taking off, and at the time scientists were trying to figure out a way that cells could keep replicating, because your cells usually only replicate a certain number of times, but like they wanted to keep cells replicating, and most of the cells that they were getting died instantly or only replicated a little bit. So when she was getting treatment for cervical cancer, a tumor in her cervix, they took a little piece of the tumor, and they found that her cells kept going and going and going and going, and her cells are still around today. Her cells were used for polio vaccine, they were used for the Gardasil vaccine, for HPV, which actually was what caused her cervical cancer, was a strain of human papillomavirus. There's at least 4 that give you cervical cancer, and they actually figured that out from her cells, and made the vaccine for HPV, which is really cool. But her cells have been to space. They're still around today, but they just kept multiplying, and they'd never seen that before. The controversial thing is that they took her cells without her family's consent and without her knowledge. They took a little piece of her tumor, and then after she died, they wanted to take more, so they asked her husband, and they're like, no, or he's like, no, I don't want you taking anything from her body. So her family this entire time doesn't even know that these cells were taken from her, like this little specimen was taken from her, until years down the line, like I think in the 90s maybe. Her daughter-in-law is sitting down to eat lunch with somebody who's in cell research, or not cell research, but like is a friend of the family's who got a job as like a lab tech at a research facility, and he was talking about HeLa cells, and her name is Henreitta Lacks, so that's why they named them HeLa, but not too many people knew her name because they kind of hid it for a long time, so a lot of people called her Helen Lane, or so like 2 other names, so a lot of people didn't know her name, but this researcher was talking about how they were working with these HeLa cells, and they kept going on forever and ever, and they came from a woman named Henreitta Lacks, and the daughter-in-law of Henreitta was like, that's my dead mother-in-law's name, and she was like, oh, that's a coincidence, maybe they came from her, and she's like, no, and they're like, well, this person's cells came from somebody who had cervical cancer, and they're like, how did you know that she had that, and that our mother-in-law had that, and she's like, well, I think they're her cells, so her family had no clue this entire time. Meanwhile, like, they're probably getting the vaccines done that came from her cells, but they had no clue that any of this was going on. So, the whole reason the book was written was a girl in high school, was talking with her, they were talking about HeLa cells, and, the book is written by this woman, but she does a really good job of, like, covering Henrietta's life, like, from the beginning, and, like, all the way, like, up into, like, the 2000s, she kind of splices in, like, stuff about Henrietta's family, and her own experiences trying to talk to the family about the cells in the first place, and, like, because they were really wary, because a couple times people tried to dupe them, or, like, said that they were gonna do all this stuff, and they never did it, so it was a struggle trying to get them to talk, but, it was a really thick book, but I got through it really fast, and it's a really interesting story. I don't know if I recommend it to everybody, because, it is, like, a little science-heavy, but I liked it, and it's a really interesting story that I think a lot more people should know about, but it was a pretty good book. The next book I read was The Last Living Slut, which was a birthday present from Andy, not this year, but, like, last year. It's about a woman who's a professional groupie. It's her memoir. She grew up in Iran, and then they fled the country, because of the politics over there, and she came to England in her teen years, and she was always, like, academic, and she kind of stood out, in English society, so she was teased, like, mercilessly, because she was a nerd, and because she kind of stood out, but the whole time, she's always been, like, a really horny kid, and she, completely idolized, like, rock stars and rock music, so when she got older, to kind of, like, start expressing herself, she pretty much spent her downtime completely, just being a groupie and sleeping with rock stars. And she's just, like, she's so dirty, like, she should be a porn star. Like, I'm not trying to, like, shame her or anything, but just, like, the stuff she does, like, she throws up on a guy, and they keep having sex, she goes and has sex with an entire band all at the same time, not, like, I mean, she does do that, too, like, goes and has sex with one, and then the other, and then the other, but, like, in all the places, all at the same time. She lets Avenged Sevenfold pee on her, so it's just a crazy, crazy book. It is really well written. It's a good book. She's a good writer, and then it just opened my eyes up to a world I'd never thought of, never even thought about reading about, and so, in that respect, I liked it. And I think I'd recommend it to people because it lets you think about a world that you've never thought about before, I don't think, and it's just a crazy ride of a book. Ended my month of reading in July with The Princess Bride. I read it in high school, but I wanted to reread it and see how it stacked up against my memory and against the movie. I remember it being really close to the movie, but what I liked about it a lot in high school was the book is supposedly an abridgment of an original copy, so the author is telling you the abridged story of the original work, which I thought was a really cool device when I was a kid. And I actually didn't know until my teacher spoiled it that it wasn't an original work, sorry if that's a spoiler, that this was just all written really by one guy. The story of Princess Bride is a girl is raised on a farm her whole life with her farmhand, and she ends up becoming one of the most beautiful women in the world, and she realizes she's in love with the farmhand, and that the farmhand is in love with her, and he was like, well, like, pretty much as soon as they confess their love for each other, he's like, I gotta go off to America and make my fortune so that I can have you and we can have a life together. So he leaves and ends up dying overseas. And, meanwhile, the prince of the country realizes that he's gonna have to marry because his father is in ailing health, and if he becomes king, he's gonna have to have a queen, but he's also plotting to start a war with a neighboring country so that I guess he can take it over. They're not really clear exactly why he wants to start a war, but he's also like a master hunter and has this really weird like dungeon for hunting that has like 5 levels underground that comes in later. But he finds out about Buttercup because she's the most beautiful woman in the world, and he's like, hey, I want to marry you, and she's like, well, just so you know, I don't plan on ever loving anybody ever again, and he's like, that's cool, I just need you by my side, for pretty much the title. So she goes and starts living with him, and then he comes up with a plan that he's going to start this war with this neighboring country by having it look like she's killed by the country. So he hires a trio of a giant, a hunchback, and a swordsman to kidnap her and kill her on that neighboring country's side, so it looks like that she was killed over there. But it is foiled by a man in black. You've probably seen the movie. You've probably even read the book, but in case you haven't, I'm not going to give any more away because after you see the man in black, there's kind of more spoilers and stuff, so I'm just going to leave it there. It was funnier than I remember it being. It was ramblier than I remember it being. I remember thinking that device was really cool in high school of him, like, abridging the book, but when I read it this time around, I just became impatient and skimmed over a lot of the sections that he was talking about, where he abridged the original book. And in this version of the book, because it was like the 25th anniversary of the book, he talks a lot about the movie in the very beginning, and like his story of writing it. And actually, I don't plan on reading this, but Carrie Yules, the actor in the movie who plays Wesley, he wrote a book all about the filming of it. It's called As You Wish, if you want to read it, and I actually just saw it at the library today. But, it was okay. It wasn't as good as I remember it being. The movie definitely is better because it doesn't have all the abridgment stuff, kind of, like, convoluting it in there. But it's definitely a really cute book, and it's funny. And it's a good adventure book. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about what I read in July, and I keep forgetting to mention these. You can find me on Goodreads. I'm going to put a link below to my Goodreads page. I also do vlogs with my 2 best friends on my YouTube channel, The Lady Spies. I have that link below. I'm going to try to include those 2 links in every single video from now on, and I'll try to not forget to periodically mention that those links are down below, and that those are places you can find me in case you want to find me. But this channel is just strictly my, like, reading stuff. Anyway, you probably had enough of me, so bye! Is, like, this video... Cute! Oh, baby! Alright. Mommy's busy. No, don't! I want you to see him. Good! You're crazy! Starting over.